Okay, we're live.
Thank you, Andy. Good evening. Welcome to this June 6th meeting of the Northborough Community Preservation Committee. I'll read the introductions. This Community Preservation Committee meeting, I will call it CPC, is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law June 16th, 2021. This meeting will be conducted by a remote participation. No in-person attendance by the public will be permitted. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19, the town of Northborough has advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of the Northborough CPC are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows Northborough CPC to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along during the deliberations. The public is encouraged to follow along using the agenda. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of the meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. And with that, I will ask for a roll call of Community Preservation Committee members who are present. Andy Dowd.
Here.
Leslie.
Here.
Jeff.
Here.
Andy Clark.
Here.
And Todd.
Here.
And that is John. I'm here as well. We have 6 members, which is a quorum. So we'll proceed. Our purpose tonight is fairly brief. We're here to review a request from the White Cliffs Committee for use of the admin funds. Also discuss briefly the CPA application deadline for the following year coming up, FY24, and the consideration of minutes and any other new business. The Community Preservation Committee, the committee and I have a vested interest in White Cliffs. We presented it to the town, told them it should be preserved, told them that it could be affordable with CPA, and the town agreed. And now we're very interested to see the next phases unfold. And so I think our members have an interest in what the admin funds would be used for, what kind of consultants we'd bring on, and how that can bring us to the next step. So with that, we were provided an overview from Lori Connors, the town planner, as well as some background information. Lori, would you like to take the floor for explanation briefly to start us?
I am going to defer to the town administrator, John Coder, who is here to speak on this issue. And any sort of questions that you have after his presentation for me, I'd be happy to answer.
No problem, John. The floor is yours.
All right, very good. Thank you for having us tonight. I appreciate you scheduling this meeting and giving us an opportunity to come before you, give you a little bit of an update, and kind of tell you where we're heading. So as you know, the DBVW is the architectural firm that completed the feasibility study and assessment on the White Cliffs property. Unfortunately, as they completed their assessment, was around the time where we were dealing with the pandemic, and basically the entire economy and everything was shutting down. The outcome of the feasibility study, and I know you've all seen it and had a chance to read it since it's been completed, but essentially what we came to the conclusion as a committee was that there weren't too many really viable, economically viable options. And so the committee had a very long discussion and essentially decided to scale back the preservation plan to get something that might be palatable and viable economically. And DBVW, the architect, referred to this as the preservation light. And essentially what we're trying to do is preserve the building, preserve the streetscape, preserve the key historic components of the historic portion of the building. We knew when we were originally received approval at town meeting that we had funding to acquire the place and then a limited number of funds to try to stabilize the place, not to rehabilitate it, but to stabilize it, essentially try to keep the water out and to keep the building from deteriorating any further. The long and short of it is when this study was completed is we really were sort of shocked, as I'm sure you were, when you saw the numbers of what it would take to do a full historic renovation and preservation of the building. So then we had a discussion around this preservation light option, and it was decided that in order for us to proceed, the town's really going to need to find a partner, a private sector partner on this project, as well as scale back, expectations. We're going to need some assistance. We're not going to be able to do this and go on our own. So we started at that point looking at getting some proposals. The first was from Peregrine. Peregrine was the sub-consultant under DBVW. They're the one who did the market analysis for us and did quite an extensive job looking at, economically viable options. The gentleman there, Eric Bush is his nickname was the Dream Killer, which I appreciate because that's usually how I get referred to when people come to me with large proposals. So our Dream Killer came in and really, I think, talked to us about scaling back in terms of what really is potentially feasible up there. So the pandemic hit, although Norm Corbin continued to do a incredible amount of work behind the scenes, reaching out to potential consultants to help us move into this next phase. Norm, Todd, and I had a couple of meetings with some of these consultants to try to flush out what is the direction that we potentially would go in. I know in your packet or in the materials that Lori put together for you, there was two proposals. One is a little bit older. It's from Peregrine. That was one of the original sub-consultants. And then there was another in there with some information from VHB, which is the consultant that just completed our master plan for the town. But essentially what we're looking at is the next phase of where do we go from here based on the somewhat daunting news that we received at the conclusion of the feasibility and reuse study is we need help moving this project forward. And so what we're looking for is to engage a consulting firm with a scope of services that essentially would help us put an RFP and RFQ, request for proposals, or interest out on the street to identify potential partners that we might be able to work with to create a preservation reuse plan for this particular facility. And it was tough when we were talking with the consultants, because usually when you go and hire a consultant, you say, this is what I'm looking for. And it was more of a dialogue and a back and forth. That's why you see quite a bit of disparity in terms of the information that was provided from the two that were included in your packet. But essentially what we're looking for is this. We're looking for a consultant that can come into the town, help us package up an RFQ to not only just get it out on the street, but then to market it and to drum up potential partners who might respond to it. The analogy I use is similar to if you're creating sort of a really unique job. That's not, if somebody read it, they wouldn't really know what it was. It was something unique that you need in your organization. If you just advertised it, the chances of getting the good candidate is not likely. What you need is a headhunter to act as a matchmaker, to bring what it is that you're looking for and to find people who might be interested in filling that slot. So what we're looking for in a consultant services is somebody who can help us package up what it is we're looking for, and then to market it and act as a matchmaker, to actively try to get partners that might submit a proposal. Now, the end game here is we're looking for someone to submit a proposal to reuse that White Cliff space. Now, part of that proposal would be, well, what do they need from us as the partner in order to make this viable. So back when we were looking at doing this, we had sufficient funds to hire the consultant. Unfortunately, due to the delay caused by primarily the pandemic, the fact that this project sort of had to take a back burner, keep in mind that of the reuse options, and there's a municipal reuse, there's housing, there's event space. The real viable, most likely viable reuse, if you really talk to the consultants, and I think the committee sort of came around to this, is it was originally an event space, and with an appropriate renovation and potential addition, more than likely the most viable option is some sort of an event space. Well, it's very difficult to find a partner or to market a building that has considerable needs and would require significant investment as an event center at a point in time where the entire economy is shut down and there are no event centers and we're not able to gather in groups of more than 20 at a time. So we continue to work with kind of defining what it is that we're seeking from a consultant. But essentially this project, we didn't make a whole lot of progress. We continue to take care of the building, fix the things that were going wrong. Trees fall, electric service, gets ripped off the building in a storm. Windows have issues. We've been continuing to take care of the building as best we can with the very limited budget that we had. Nobody anticipated that we'd be going this long. Unfortunately, as you all are well aware, the south chimney, which was identified by DBVW, the architect, as a rebuild that they would like us to do or offered as one of the priorities, the committee decided not to move forward that just due to the lack of budget. Just like we declined to move forward with one of the other primary suggestions coming out of the study, which was to remove the compromised additions. Those dollar figures were just well beyond the money that was originally requested at town meeting to pay for the facility and to, in a minimal basis, sort of keep it going. So we have insurance expenses, we have storage expenses for the historical artifacts that were removed from there that are in storage in the facility in Worcester. We have, limited expenses in terms of electricity and so forth. So as this is going on, that budget has been eaten into. We still had sufficient funds to move forward. But as I said, unfortunately, that south face chimney did not make it through one of the last storms. And as we brought in consultants, masons to come in to look at it, they determined that it couldn't be shored up. It really needs to be removed and brought down and capped pending, whatever the full renovation project is that we are going to contemplate for the facility. So that unfortunately was $60,000. And that was the lion's share of the remaining funds that we have. Now, in the memo that was provided to you from Lori, we also do have some dehumidification that we are moving forward with on that facility. So the White Cliffs Committee met on May 26th. They voted $60,000. I've already executed the contract. The contractor, the mason, mobilized today and will be removing the compromised chimney starting tomorrow. And so that sort of leaves us with, well, we've had to spend the money to take care of this aging facility, particularly the chimney. And we have the ongoing carrying costs, as I've already described. The problem is now that next phase that we'd like to do, which is to engage a consultant to move this project forward. That funding it no longer exists. We don't have enough to deal with the ongoing carrying costs of the facility, the issues that we've had to manage and deal with, and engage the consultant. So on May 26th, when the White Cliffs Committee met, the discussion was to come back to the CPC and to request, and they voted formally to do this, to request your remaining administrative funds, $26,394 that you have in FY22. That my understanding, and I don't want to speak for the committee, but through the chair, my understanding is that those fiscal 2022 funds are going to lapse on June 30th of this year, and the committee has no designs on those. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to come back, give you an update on where we are, and to request that you release those funds for purposes of allowing us to move this project into the next phase, to engage the consultant to help us market the facility to try to find a partner. So this process ultimately is something, depending on the consultant, we're talking about doing this over the next several months in the summer. In an ideal world, we would find somebody that wants to come in and work with the town and partner with us. It would be a long haul this isn't going to be a white knight's going to come in and, hey, here's $10 million, we're going to take care of this for you. More than likely, it's going to be a combination of funding from grants, historic preservation funds, potentially more CPC funds, potentially American Rescue Plan Act funds that the town has at its disposal, and grants and all the other things that go into trying to patch together something that would be viable to save a historic artifact like White Cliffs is. But the problem for us right now here tonight before you is that because of the maintenance costs that we've incurred for the facility, we don't have enough to move forward with that consultant. So the basic ask is for you to release those funds. I believe we need about $32,000. And so between your fiscal 22, and I believe there's a request for about $5,600 from your FY23 administrative funds, we believe that would be sufficient for us to move forward with this process. The goal would be to go through the process through the summer, early fall, start to get some meat around a skeleton of what we want to do and where we want to go, and package up something potentially that would come back to town meeting next year. So within our remaining budget, we have sufficient funds to pay for the insurance, the electricity, the carrying costs, the dehumidification, the stabilization, dismantling and storage of the compromised chimney. And we have about $15,000 roughly remaining for unknowns, which seem to pop up frequently with this old facility. But in order for us to move forward, engage the consultant, we need a little bit of help. And that's the fundamental basic ask of you this evening. So I know you have a lot of information. I'm hoping that most of you watched our meeting from May 26th. So it was a very lengthy discussion about how best to proceed in terms of maintaining the facility. But the bottom line is the unanimous support of the committee is to come back to the CPC and request those administrative funds that you don't need in this cycle for this fiscal year and allow us to move forward. We need these funds in order to essentially move this project forward to see, where we're going to ultimately get to. Without these funds, we don't have sufficient funding to engage a consultant at the level that we believe would be necessary to make real progress. So that's the ask.
Thanks for the summary, John. I know that CPC members will have some questions, and I think toward the goal of your request and the goal of the consultant, which you touched on a little bit, I'd like to let any members present to ask those questions and get a little more detail there. Does anyone want to chime in? I open the floor.
Hi, this is Andy Clark. Thank you, John and John, for the update and everything. I was looking at the proposals, and just in my, I guess, as a question of ignorance, now that wouldn't there be, if we're looking for selecting somebody to come in and work with us, it's a developer by all definitions. Why wouldn't we be, wouldn't there be a realtor or somebody that would, I guess, they'd be doing that, and it would be more of on a commission-based thing? So when the deal is done, there might be, I know it would be an unspecified amount until that time, until the deals were actually done, but it would be somebody who's working beyond it, or is that not viewed as an option on this particular project?
Yeah, through the chair, if I may. So yeah, we
sir.
can't engage as a public entity through a process that results in commissions being paid. Essentially, and we spent a lot of time talking, especially Norm Corbin spent a lot of time calling any consultant and really any potential group that might be interested in working with us on this project. But essentially what we need is, an independent consultant that is working for the town to help us package up this offering in a way that would encourage the appropriate folks to apply, essentially, if that makes sense. It's tough because we don't know what we want until we see it. And it's tough to get somebody to come in, if you're trying to just sell the place, which is really not the intent here, working off of commission. We're not trying to sell or market the place in that regard. What we're trying to do is find somebody who we can strike a deal with where, obviously the town is going to bring something to the table. We've already essentially paid for or are continuing to pay for the acquisition cost. Is that enough to buy down the cost so that somebody who is interested in bringing this back and putting it on the tax rolls and to bring it back and bring it into use, would that now somehow make it viable for them? And so, like I said, it's more than likely going to be a patch together of a bunch of different funding sources and grants and opportunities to get somebody in to make this viable. I think that the hard lesson that we took away from the feasibility and reuse study was that this is an extremely expensive building to bring up to code and to get back into a functional use, which means, again, anybody, as far as the private sector, just straight up private sector was concerned, the realtor who was working on commission for the private owner previously was unable to find anybody that was willing to do that didn't want to tear the structure down. So what we want to maintain this structure. And so we need to find somebody that we can work with that would be willing to try to patch something together that would potentially be economically viable. So it's, these things aren't easy. Unfortunately, the current economy is going to make it a little bit more difficult. It's what we need is somebody to act as our agent to help us through, to guide it, and then to market the place, but not work off commission. We don't have the ability to hire people and pay them off commission because we're a public entity. We have to follow the procurement.
Sorry, I spaced that component out and apologize for that. So a follow-up, how do you see the difference in the two proposals?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a big difference between the proposal. Again, these aren't really formally proposals so much as we met with them and told them what we're trying to do. And then we said, give us a proposal for what you think we're asking for and roughly what that might cost. So in fairness, Pellegrin was the first one. And that proposal is not, it's older. And so, what he said was, look, I'm perfectly willing to help you with this, but you don't really know exactly what you want. I don't know exactly how much time. So it's more of a time and material sort of a proposal, is a base expense and then a time and materials. Ultimately, what we would do if we did decide to go with that particular consultant is we'd have to put some sort of a cap on it. So meeting with VHB, who knows a little bit more about the town, having completed our master plan, and having a little bit, every time we talk to a consultant, we get a little bit better understanding and clarity around what it is that we are seeking and needing. VHB took a shot at giving us a little bit more detail based on their proposal, and the timing of that. I think You'll see a little bit more detail in there. But what our intent would be for these two consultants and perhaps a third. If you remember back when we first were trying to help find somebody for White Cliffs, we engaged Kirk and Company to do a market analysis. They may or may not be interested in throwing their hat in the ring as well. But I think what it would be, Andy, is we would bring probably the three consultants in, meet with the committee, talk through, and then the committee would make a selection over which a consultant seems to be most highly advantageous for us to move forward with. I think at the end of the day, the cost is going to be comparable because you have to have some sort of, bookends around it, some limits to it. But the idea is for this funding, and we're asking for $32,000 in total here. Would you be able to, as a consultant, come in, create an RFP, put it out on the street, market it, and help us sort of help us get folks that might be interested or willing to send in a proposal? And then ultimately, the proposal process itself, an RFP process, a request for proposals, doesn't mean or limit us that we would have to take the lowest priced or the best price proposal. What it means is we'd get these proposals and then we would evaluate them on other criteria, not just monetary criteria, and determine which one makes the most sense for us to pursue. This is very different and unlike, a typical building project. We don't have a lot of clarity, and it's not a straight path. And I think there's going to be some creativity and a tremendous amount of back and forth. We may only get one person that's even interested in putting some kind of a proposal in, and we don't know what that proposal looks like. But where we are in this process, and I don't want to beat around the bush here, is this, in my opinion, is the shot that we have. The straight up that we're going to get someone to come in and just redevelop this parcel without some additional help or patching things together. The numbers, and the sub-consultant was very clear that it's highly, highly unlikely. And again, if somebody like that were going to materialize, they probably would have materialized before the town had to step in and save the place from being demolished. So there's a lot of ambiguity, and this is just going to be a process. If we want to continue to try to save this building, this is the logical next step to move forward with. And I'm not trying to be evasive. It's hard because I can't see Andy's face, so I don't know if he's rolling his eyes or if he's nodding in agreement. But I guess we don't. We need. This is the process that we have left. This is what we've been able to identify. And I don't have a lot of really firm detail for you other than, it would come as part of the process.
Reading the proposals, not my reservation, but my fear is that we would have another document that does not necessarily bring them closer. And I guess if the document is, or not just the document, but the activity that surrounds the next thing comes up with, or has enough energy where they are actively marketing the potential of the site. Let's just call it that, because it's, because you're right. I 100% agree with you that there's absolutely no one knows what the final thing is going to be. That's both the deal, if a deal happens, and what the facility, what's going to be involved, in terms of additions and subtractions and structures and construction and all that. That none of that can't be foreseen, because we don't know what that person is going to bring with what their view they're going to bring, their vision is going to be, and that has to bend around their vision if they're going to be involved. And I think that the only thing that we have to have negotiables and non-negotiables, like conservation restrictions and that are non-negotiable and whatever else that what might be available to use as a bargaining chip or an incentive to bring development to it. But I just didn't want to, my fear is that these documents, or my hope is that these documents produce action. They're actually people that are, that they really, because they kind of said, well, we're going to spend like 5 hours calling people. And, Norm can tell you that that's probably not going to work, even if they're very targeted and very special phone calls. It seemed like it would be a lot of work, a lot more than that sort of things, even if they have the connection to bring about, a real action out of the money. Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, again, through the chair, we won't know until we take the shot. And, unfortunately, this is where we are. We're not in this position through lack of effort and lack of understanding. I think we're in the position we're in because we have actually clarity around the real needs of the building, the real cost of the building, the real viability of the different options. Rather, people say, well, why don't you open it as a museum? Or, we've heard every suggestion. We have, through professional analysis, we've gotten to where we are today. This is the next step. And honestly, I'd be thrilled if we had one viable application or proposal. If we had two, even better. But yeah, that's one of the things that we're looking at in terms of the consultants is not just their ability to put this thing together, but to help us, market and connect. And nothing precludes members of the CPC or the White Cliffs Committee from making phone calls and trying to get this out there. It's kind of like, putting a house on the market. You don't just put your house on the market to see if anybody's interested. If you're really motivated to sell, you need to sell. You want to make sure that you put your very best foot forward. And that's what we're trying to do here with the consultant, is to package this up and put it out at a time when we're likely to get some people that are interested. Nobody, as I said, rewind even. She's in January. I was talking about whether or not we had to shut town office buildings down again because of COVID again. We're at 10% right now in terms of 10% positivity, and so it's been a pretty bumpy ride. But I think we're at the point now that, look, this is the process, and it's not going to be perfect, but we'll get it out there and see what's out there. There really isn't any other. The only other thing is we're just going to be hanging on to the place and trying to slap Band-Aids on it. But the reality is it's a very big, very expensive, very deteriorated building. That's how we got it, and it doesn't get better with time. So the sooner now that we can get out and try to get this moved along, I think the better. And again, would I have recommended doing this, 12 months ago? No. You go out, nobody was thinking along these lines. It just, nobody was out looking to open new public facility venues, so hopefully now they are starting to think along those lines, though. I talk long enough now. I just put them to sleep. I don't. No, I just.
I'm done with my
If you want
questions for the moment.
Yeah, I'm looking. If you want to give us more money, I'm not going to decline it. But what we're doing is trying to hit look. What we came to you with is this is what the consultants are telling us is a reasonable fee to do what we're asking of them. If we need more services, that's a discussion for another time. And I'm not trying to do the old camel's nose under the tent. This is a real effort of talking to, hours and hours of talking to various consultants about what they think is reasonable and what they would be able to do for us. Again, it's like hiring a headhunter. you're hiring them in part for their connections and for their ability to try to match make for you. So that's a big part of what we're looking for.
But John, just cutting in for a minute, you know, the admin fund money is the town's money, and I have a hunch, absent a formal vote just now, I have a hunch we'll be supportive. It's I don't think that in and of itself is the issue. I knew that some members, including myself, had interest in a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the potential of the consultant that would be chosen. We only have the two, let's just call them both preliminary proposals to review. And so I wanted to give members a sense to chime in a little bit on that, and then also ask anything about the White Cliffs committee process, which you have covered in detail. And we have one member, Norm Corbin, listening in as well. To the other CPC members, Todd, Jeff, Andy, Leslie, does anyone want to add anything or ask additional questions of the result of the admin money, specific to what Andy, Clark, and John have just been discussing?
And if I may, through the chair, just briefly, just again, these aren't the proposals. We're not just choosing. This is, at this stage, what we would refer to this is market research. So we want to hire a consultant. We want to put something together. This is the market research piece of roughly what it would look like. So this isn't the finished product. We would have the consultants in. We'd go through that. We'd negotiate a contract and get a very clear, detailed scope of services. If there's something that John, you or our other CPC committee members specifically want to see in that rough, market, scope that we've put together, I think the committee would be open to any feedback. We're all trying to get to the same place.
No,
sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. Jeff, do you have a hand up? Jeff, you're muted.
Thought I had hit that button. I just wanted to just add quickly that it's clear from John's presentation, the letter that Lori sent May 31st, and really what I've heard over the last several years on this committee, that the White Cliffs committee is doing the best they possibly can. It's a tough project, and the money has been husbanded very carefully to preserve and protect it, the property. It seems to me clear from what John had said that this is really maybe the only possible step right now, but certainly a good viable step that hopefully can lead to some progress. So I'm supportive of it.
Thank you.
So can I ask,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, who was that? Anyone else?
so the White Cliffs committee would be choosing between these two proposals. That's not choosing one or two of the VHB or Peregrine right now. That's not what we're doing. It's just voting on the cash, and then the committee basically refines what these two are offering and then would make a decision. Is that the synopsis correct?
Yes, through the chair, these are the two, after all of the market research and all the phone calls trying to identify consultants that would help us with this type of project. These are two of the best that we came up with. There's likely a third. And so the idea would be to ask them each to sort of freshen up a fresh proposal, contemporaneous proposal, submit it, come in and meet with the committee. The committee would interview them, ask questions, and then ultimately select which consultant we believe, or the committee believes, would be the best, most viable option to move forward with. So we're not voting on a specific consultant tonight.
No, that's understood. Todd Hillwig, Andy Dowd, Leslie, any additional input?
I'm supportive of it. I don't have any other questions or comments.
Well, for my part, I wanted to give other members a chance to speak. I did want to comment on 3 areas. One, I know we're not picking the consultant, but the direction of the study intrigued me in the proposal. So I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about the amount of money that you're requesting in the admin funds and what might be available beyond that. And then I wanted to touch briefly on where CPA might be involved in the next phase. And you touched on that briefly, John. So these are my comments, and I know we're not picking the consultant, but I was, because they were the only documents provided, and was able to kind of study the scope of it. The VHB is a known source and extremely professional, and I've just some limited experience with them from the master plan and my role on the implementation committee, and I trust they would do an extremely good job. But when I read their scope and their deliverable, so to speak, and I compared it to the Peregrine proposal, what stood out is that I got the impression Peregrine would more directly engage in the marketing and the headhunting, as you referenced, John, finding the job applicant, if I can use your analogy, maybe compared to VHB, whose expertise and whose focus is delivering a product that you can use. And I recognize, just again, based on the examples that you've given, you've got a firm price from VHB, and you have more of an open-ended contract with Peregrine. So, and if there was a third similar consultant, it would seem to me, and I'm always a little bit in a rush, so forgive me. I know you can't always rush the process, certainly not in this case. But if the chosen consultant got you closer to your goal, as opposed to just more ideas to get to your goal, then that would be something that I'd like to see happen, and would be supportive of. And I know that's the next step after your request here. The second thing I wanted to touch on is you've got a specific amount that you requested. We could use that as our consideration and ultimately our motion. But there are, an additional nearly 32,000 in FY23 administration funds that the town approved at the last town meeting. They would be available for this purpose. And in evaluating the purpose, I believe there's no doubt that this qualifies as a use of the admin funds. But usually it is in support either of the management of a project, such as maybe a conservation restriction on land that we buy, or in the preparation of an application for a next phase. And that's what gets me to the third thing I wanted to ask about, and that you touched on. I think that our committee is going to be more focused on what we can do to bring forth fund requests that would contribute to the next phase of White Cliffs. And at least for my part, as long as I'm on the committee, I'm going to make sure that that's a focus. I think that for all the reasons that you mentioned, we didn't so much as ignore it as we didn't have anybody driving something. Could we have helped with more money for maintenance and rebuilding chimneys and things like that? Maybe. But as we do go forward, we've got to remember that what we would request for funds under CPA, we'd have to craft it in a way, that's not the right word, structure it in a way that we are contributing to the restoration, which can be, restoring services and fixing things and so on, bringing the building back to what it needs to be, not strictly, historically accurate restorations, but everything regarding restoration. So we'd have to be focused on what can we do to help there. So I'm trying to bring those 3 thoughts together as where I see the CPC helping the next phase, not just this goal today, but the next phase, if that comes through in the right way to you, John, and to those here on the White Cliffs Committee.
Yeah, John, if I may, just so in terms of the contracts, I know they're structured different, but whatever contract we executed, there would be a not to exceed amount.
Sure.
But we'd want to make sure in working with the consultant that not to exceed amount was realistic to get what it is we think we're going to get. So that would be a little bit of a back and forth with consultants. In terms of your last point, though, whatever we get for a response for a potential partner, it's going to require a lot of communication with the CPC, with all the boards and committees, the Board of Selectmen, appropriations, potentially financial planning. But like I said, the way I see this project being viable is just going to be bringing together a bunch of supportive pieces from all different angles. Like I said, grants, potentially CPC, maybe ARPA funding. It could be any number of these things. I think right now what we don't know is we don't know what that structure looks like, and we don't know what the ultimate dollar figure is. You know, we don't know what a potential partner would need for in terms of a subsidy from us as a partner to make this work for them, to be viable. I also think, and I've said this to the committee, is, you know, one of the things that we can offer, depending on what the final project is, you know, we can look at a tax increment financing agreement. That would be something approved by a town meeting that would essentially forego some of the taxes, some or all of the taxes for a period of time, to allow them to reinvest it in the structure. So there's a lot of different pieces that can be brought together. It's going to be a lot of talking and collaboration in that phase.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. So specifically, though, what I want to put out there in the air is that when you begin the process of evaluating, you know, who might become this consultant, if it appears there may be, you know, more than one phase to that amount, if you don't want to be limited by the amount of roughly $32,000 that you're asking for, then I think it would be perfectly acceptable to come back to the CPC, because we'll have, after July, the FY23 additional admin funds, and there's no other major use of those that's in front of us in terms of any other consultant or appraisal and so on. I know that the use of the funds traditionally has been for things like that. It's also to pay the secretary who performs minutes and so on for the CPC, and it's also to pay the dues on the Community Preservation Coalition, which is what accounted for the roughly $5,000 in expenditures out of the FY22 money. So, you know, think of that, take that out of the $37,000 we've got for FY23, and there's still a lot there. So I just wanted to put it out there that if you feel like more would be needed and the consultant comes back for more or comes with a phase two, that's a possibility.
We appreciate that long-term partnership, John. You know, we're coming to the committee with what we, based on all the market research that we did, what we think is a reasonable budget for the next step. But I think you're right. We don't know what the future holds, and if there's something else in there, I appreciate knowing and the willingness to at least have a conversation about additional funds if they're necessary. But never, hopefully the consultants aren't watching this meeting. We never like them to know that we have more money until we get the full value out of them. I don't want to negotiate against ourselves, but no, I appreciate those comments.
No, although the figures in your old proposals are remarkably similar to what you're looking for. So, you know, these things do have a way of working out. Okay, so then in conclusion, the request tonight is for a total of $32,000 from admin funds, and that would be comprised of $26,394 from existing FY22 admin funds that are unspent, and $5,606 from FY23 admin funds when that becomes available. Does any CPC member have a comment on those funds, the amounts, and where we came to those numbers?
No.
Hearing none, I might entertain a motion on that.
Make that motion.
Second.
That was Jeff on the motion and Todd on a second. Thank you. So the motion before us is to approve said 32,000 in administrative funds from FY22 and FY23 to the White Cliffs Committee. Any other discussion of the motion? Hearing
No.
none, we'll take a roll call vote on approving that motion. Andy Dowd,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes,
Jeff,
Yes.
Andy Clark,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
and me, John, yes. So it is approved 6-0.
Thank you. And as we get moving, and the project is now moving again and been picked up, the communication stream will be more frequent, more regular, as we move forward.
Understood,
Appreciate
and
your
I know,
support.
yeah, and we fully understand, it was hard to figure out where the next shoe was going to drop and run the town, let alone handle all the committees that you both handle. So our appreciation for what you do.
Yes.
The next agenda item is brief. It doesn't involve you so much, John, as Lori, but I'm just going to throw it out there real quickly. Our CPA application deadline was traditionally more like July 1, maybe August 1. And as time went on, we always got applications late and became very flexible in that deadline. And it kind of creeped up to, I think it was November 1, and even then had flexible income. And we would remain to be flexible rather than rigid as a committee. But my proposal is that we move this deadline back, at least in our minds, and what we post to be something more close to September 1, or maybe 1 week further to allow for Labor Day. And why I say that is I felt like this year we got flooded with a lot of applications and very little time to evaluate them. And I personally felt like they were all viable projects, and we were looking for a way to bring them all to fruition. And we found a path, but no disrespect to those who worked so hard on the housing project, but we got to the end of the game, and the biggest one that we had could not go forth. And again, not really the fault of anyone on the project, but it brings to the point that when you have enough time for due diligence early on and can press for those facts on the applications, we sometimes can root out whether that particular application is viable and can go forth in the current year, or whether it needs more time to develop. And so that kind of struck me, and I wondered if it struck any other committee member. So that's my proposition for what we post as our application deadline for this year.
John, will we be allowed to grant waivers to that application deadline?
I believe that we would, and I know that we probably will. But if the mindset of applicants, be it usually coming from various other town committees, if the mindset is such that you've got to start thinking about setting this up in the late spring because summer goes by so quickly and meetings are sometimes less frequent, and have an application ready in September, then I think we could begin meeting and get back to meeting a little more regularly, say in October, where we have the slate of applications before us. And if, for instance, we say you got to take this back to recreation because you haven't thought it out fully enough, or take it back to the historic commission or whatever, or we get weigh in from those committees, and we know a little better what makes sense to bring forward, including what might we be trying to do for town meeting 2023 with respect to White Cliffs.
Well, that's the point, right? I don't want to foreclose somebody from, if we hire this consultant and we get a plan and we miss the deadline, then we miss a year. I just don't want to have that be the pitfall.
Good, I understand where you're coming from. I don't know if we can express it differently in the way we post it, but I guess I'd like to see that we begin reviewing applications earlier in the season. And for various reasons, we've had kind of a shortened CPC schedule, and I felt pressured by it this year. So we have always been flexible, and particularly when a project has a placeholder, then that leaves the opportunity to revise it. So that would be an acceptable practice as it has been customarily for us.
John,
Yes,
I wonder if you'd be willing to consider a rolling period of time where folks could start submitting in September and maybe having a absolute deadline of, say, November 30th. So that way you could start reviewing the proposals, but not give a set deadline, give a little bit of flexibility. So it'd be like a 2-month rolling window. Is that something that you would consider?
yeah, that's actually an interesting approach, kind of like college admissions. So if you get it in early, you might have a better chance of succeeding, and so on, right? I think that's a good idea, Lori. And maybe you could help put text and words to that. And I didn't notice on the Current Time website, I don't see anything about the application and any deadline. I think at some point in time it gets posted there, but maybe that's something we could start posting, where application deadline is, it's rolling, as you put it. And maybe it's, I'm looking at, the first Monday in September is Labor Day. So, maybe it's like September 12th and it goes to, as you say, November 28th or something like that. If you'd be willing to give that a little thought and bounce the idea back at me, then I think that's probably a really good idea to accomplish both goals.
I would be happy to do that.
Very good. So we don't need to so much vote or meet on that any further. We'll post it accordingly. That would bring us to actually the fourth agenda item is what might be a next meeting date. And we were trying to do first Thursday of the month, and if that's still good with everybody, we could do like October 6th as a proposal that we probably don't need to meet until then, except if there's something special that comes up. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Very good. I wrote it down.
Good with me.
Okay,
I'm gonna
great.
leave you guys. Thank you for your support, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Norm, you're
care.
welcome. I didn't call on you. You also didn't scream and yell. So
I didn't need to. It was well covered. I just wanted to make sure I was tuned in. So thanks for letting me come in.
very good.
Thank you,
Welcome
Norm.
anytime. You're an honorary member. You know that.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, Norm.
I'm gonna head out. Thank you, guys.
No
Bye-bye.
trouble. Thank you,
Bye,
John.
thanks, John. Hey,
Les,
I
don't
have,
you have to go?
yeah, I have a class I have to be at. I told them I might be a couple minutes late, so if we can, is it just the agenda at this point, or?
It's just the meeting minutes.
That's what I mean, minutes, yeah.
Yeah, but I've been reading them in the background here, so I know that I've studied them. Has everyone else studied them? And is there a motion to approve them?
So
I did
moved.
receive one typo correction from Leslie. Thank you, Leslie. So I will correct the spelling of the name.
Thank you very much. There was a motion to approve, came from
Second,
Andy was the second. Who motioned it?
I did, Leslie.
Leslie. Okay, thank you, Leslie. Then a roll call vote to approve the minutes of April 21, 2022. Andy Dowd,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes,
Jeff,
Yes.
Andy Clark,
yes.
Todd,
Yes.
and me, John. Minutes are approved. Thank you all for making time to meet tonight. It was productive. Any
Thank
other
you.
business before the committee?
thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
very
Bye-bye.
much, John.
We're all
To
good then.
adjourn.
Everyone say aye to adjourn.
All right.
Aye.
Have a good
Thanks
night.
all and good
Good night,
evening.
guys.